Good afternoon. My name is Sheila Lamb, and I'm with the Virginia SBDC Network. For those of you that are not familiar with our organization, the Virginia Small Business Development Center is a partnership program between the U.S. Small Business Administration, George Mason University, and local host institutions throughout Virginia. With 26 locations across the Commonwealth, we provide training and technical assistance to small businesses in their local communities. Our one-on-one advising services are available at no charge. Today's webinar, Franchising 2, Trends, Opportunities, and Obstacles, is presented by the Virginia SBDC Network with FranNet of Virginia and DC. We are recording today's presentation, and it will be posted on our website, virginiasbdc.org. Due to the large number of participants, everyone's microphone is muted, and the chat feature is turned off. But if you have questions during the presentation, you can type those into the Q&A box, and we will address them at the end of the session. We have also enabled the live transcript function, which you can show or hide via your own meeting controls. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Heather Rosen, President of FranNet of Virginia and DC. Heather is a franchise specialist from longtime SBDC resource partner and the creator of the SBDC's FranFit program. That was a tongue twister. FranNet. Heather began her career as a lawyer, advising businesses on contractual matters and litigation strategy, and then ran marketing and business development teams for large international law firms. In 2009, she left the legal services to go into business for herself through a franchise. Now the owner of 2 franchises, Heather conducts franchise education workshops for the Virginia SBDC and several other organizations, provides coaching on how to make the transition from employee to entrepreneur, and offers guidance to people researching full-time, active, semi-passive, or large-scale area development franchise opportunities. Please join me in welcoming Heather Rosen.
Thank you so much, Sheila, for the nice introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. I am pleased to present this program for the first time. As I was telling Sheila, I've been speaking on franchise topics and trends for a very long time, but this is a program that I have specifically created for the Virginia SBDC. So we would love to get your feedback at the end. I believe Sheila is going to have an evaluation form that she sends out, so that we can just make this better and better for this audience. I'm going to talk about trends, obstacles, and opportunities today. This is sort of a advanced class on franchising, but I am going to also talk about where we came from so that you can understand why some of these trends are happening and why there are some of these opportunities. And I'm also going to very briefly run through the basics of franchising because some of the people on this webinar may not have seen that introductory program. But very briefly, this is not a repeat of that program. About me, I am, as Sheila said, a consultant. I talk to people about businesses and what they should be researching. I give them a lot of tools, but I went into business through a franchise myself. FranNet itself is a franchise. So people say I drank my own Kool-Aid, but the reality was what happened was I was working for law firms my entire career. I had a big salary to replace. If I was going to go into business, I needed to be able to do that in a fairly short amount of time. I needed to know that if I went into business, quit my job and invested money into a business, that it was definitely going to work with my skill set that I brought to the table, and it was going to work within a fairly short amount of time because, again, I was making a lot of money. I was, at the time, the primary breadwinner in my household, so I did not have the luxury of experimentation. I could not just try a business idea that I had, see if it worked. If it didn't work, it was going to be okay. It wasn't going to be okay if it didn't work. So for me, going into business through an established, proven franchise partner was the only way I was going to be able to do that. Since then, I'm still with the same franchise. My franchise is now a research feed for me. I mean, It's not the training that it was during the first couple of months. They continue to provide a very valuable service, replacing an employee or two that I would have otherwise had to hire. So I continue to work through them and with their headquarters office. And I have since gone into business with a second franchise with a partner this time, and I'll talk about partnerships and pros and cons, but suffice to say that it is a part-time, more like a not a hobby. It's still a business. It still earns money, but it's not my primary source of income. But it was more of a something, I guess, to replace my the care that I was taking of my daughter that she went to college, and I needed a new thing to fill that time. Um, but I went into business the second time through a franchise too, which is a testament to the fact that for me, a franchise made a lot of sense and it continued to make a lot of sense. I will also say that it is not for everybody. There are definitely people who don't do well in a franchise, and I'll try to give you some clues as to who does well and who doesn't do well with a franchise um, today. And as Sheila said, I used to practice law. I always liked the fact when you researched a franchise, there was evidence there that either the business model worked or it didn't work. There's not a lot that if you know what you're doing, if you know how to research franchises, it's really hard to miss something because ultimately you have franchisees who will tell you if the business works or not. And you can dive into their background to see if they had, some sort of special skill or type of experience that they had to bring to the table or not. And then, of course, since then, I've written a lot, including contributing a chapter to this book called More Than Just French Fries, which is available on Amazon. So this company that I work through called Frannet, my research arm, they have been in business since 1987. They were, I believe, the first company to formally research franchises and advise people who are trying to find the best franchise or to see if there even was a franchise that would make sense. As Sheila said, we are the only such company that has been asked by the SBDC to be its resource partner. We've published materials for them. Our CEO has been on the board of the big industry association for franchising, the only one actually in the United States, which is called the International Franchise Association, sitting on that board with some of the biggest franchises in the world. So maybe that's a testament as to how we're regarded in this industry. I do have colleagues throughout the country. Some of them are more experienced, some are less experienced, but I've been doing this since 2009, about 15 years, and I think I have some good advice for people going through this process. And so what my main function is as a matchmaker, match people who want to be in business with a franchise that meets their needs. And so there's a bunch of information that I collect about people in order to give them that kind of advice. The nice thing about this business for me, which was not the case when I was a lawyer, is I don't have to charge a fee for it. The franchise industry regards me as a recruiter of sorts. They're looking for good people to open up more locations of their company. And so they pay me a success fee if I happen to refer somebody who they really like and they invite to join the franchise and that person accepts, just like the recruiting model that many of you are familiar with. So like I said, it's a matchmaking process. And what I didn't mention before is we pre-screen. So when I recommend businesses to people, because we're so new, or not new, we're very well known. Most franchises come to us when they want to grow and they say, find us more candidates. We turn most of them away. When I say we, it's Frannet. I really lean on their corporate office heavily to screen all of the franchises that come to them and say, find us good people, because none of us want to recommend a bad business to people. We'll actually call will go through their government documents, their government filings, but FranNet corporate office will also call franchisees from these companies and ask them how they're doing. And so what I end up getting is the bottom of that funnel, which is the ones that have checked all the boxes, made it through the interviews, the government filings look good, there's no red flags that we see. And FranNet will give me all the information, all the statistics, who their best candidates are. And that's the information that I use to advise people. So it, like I said, it helps me out tremendously as somebody who is talking to people about which franchises they should be focused on. And then I can give them a bunch of resources, questions, and a lot more to go as they go through this process so they can really, get down to the best one. So as I said before, I want to give you just a little bit on franchising, just because I don't know how much everyone on this webinar knows. What is a franchise? I mean, you've certainly heard the term. I mean, it's interesting during the sports drafts, we hear this franchise, the Commanders, the Nationals, this franchise, and a franchise those are also franchises, sort of. What they have in common with the kind of franchises that I'm talking about is intellectual property that gets licensed to other people to use, and that becomes part of the brand. You'll hear me talk about brand. But the way it works with a franchise is you have the headquarters up here, the operators, the franchisees, and the customers. And it's sort of a distribution model a little bit. But really how it works is somebody starts a business, they sell a product or the service, and hopefully make it successful. Hopefully they do that first before they decide to launch a franchise division. I say that because sometimes there are franchisees that really don't have a successful business model, but hopefully they prove it, they make money, they make enough money for somebody else to be interested in doing the same thing, and they make a decision to launch a franchise division. At that point, they have to hire recruiters and trainers, and then marketing people and IT people, and the office will grow over time. But they go to a lawyer and they ask the lawyer to draft a disclosure document, an FDD, which gets filed with the federal government, and it also gets filed with several states, including Virginia, including Maryland, including New York. There's several registration states. And the document is a disclosure document because it's supposed to bring to somebody's attention anything that could be a red flag, litigation, costs to open up the business that somebody might not be aware of. Because a lot of times when people research these businesses, all they see is this is the franchise fee. But the franchise fee is just the license to run this business. It's what you're paying the franchise for, all of the training and hand-holding and the paperwork and all of that to actually have a business, but you don't necessarily have a business after paying the franchise fee. So they launch a franchise division, they hire people, again, hopefully, this is what they should be doing, to support franchisees. They have a service contract. They have a contract that becomes what the franchisees get. They get the disclosure document, and then if they're awarded a franchise, they get a contract that says, this is what we will do for you, franchisee, but this is what you should and should not be doing in order to maintain this agreement. Because if you break these rules, if you break the agreement, we could kick you out. Now, that scares a lot of people. The reality is, once a company makes this decision to launch a franchise division, they really, really, really want it to work. They don't want to kick franchisees out. It's really only in the most extreme cases that somebody actually loses a business. But it can happen. But normally what happens is if you do something that your franchise agreement says that you shouldn't do, usually, you get a talking to, and they say, hey, you might not, you're not living up to this benchmark, you're not doing this, or you are doing that, and that's a problem, that's a violation of your agreement, correct it. Because again, they really want to grow. That's why they did this in the first place. That's why they have this whole support team to work with franchisees. They don't want to shrink. Um, so when you're a franchisee, you pay this one-time license fee, a franchise fee, and then you pay royalties. Royalties support the headquarters team. You have a bunch of people who are doing work for, they're hired expressly to work for you and the other franchisees, your colleagues. And so the royalty pays their salary, and of course includes some profit for the company's founders, because that's their incentive for, this is a for-profit company. But when you talk to other franchisees, one of the things that you're going to ask and evaluate is whether what you pay, the franchise fee and the royalties, is worth what you get. And I'm not going to go much further on this, but it ends up being almost like a line item when you're looking through your expenses. Is it worth it to pay this group of people for the services they deliver? And from the franchise's perspective, from when they started as a company and they developed into a franchise, eventually the royalties become more important than the sales from the products and service. They become a franchise company. Sometimes they keep some corporate stores. Sometimes they sell them off and they offer them as franchises themselves. But either way, this is a business division. Think of it as a business division of a company, and the royalties become a very, very important part of the revenue, which again is why they really don't want to exit franchisees. So I'm going to talk to you about the trends and obstacles and opportunities, but I want to take you back first to 2021, a year into the pandemic. And I don't want to dwell too much on it, but this is a talk that I gave on February 23rd, 2021. What is happening and how does this impact franchising? And so at this point, if you remember, there was a vaccine, but most people were not eligible to get it yet. And we were definitely still in the middle of COVID, but we could see a light at the end of the tunnel. So what I said was, what I think is going to happen, how it's going to impact franchises, is that the franchises that can support construction projects are going to do well, because if you remember, there was a lot of outside building happening because people could work outside, and homeowners were spending on outside construction projects because they needed a place to meet with people. A lot of people adopted pets during the pandemic, so I thought there was going to be a big opportunity for pet care and pet supplies. People were having COVID babies, so children needed to be cared for when parents went back to work and educated, because also there was already a learning gap developing. I said that people are going to need to recover personally. They were going to need to get back into shape. They were going to have to go to professional beauticians to get, looking the way that they did before COVID. So salon businesses were going to have a boom after everybody was able to freely leave their house. I said there was going to be a big dating boom because, again, people weren't really able to date they weren't able to see people very much during COVID. I thought the restaurant models were going to change. They already had at this point, where there was a big pickup section, but I thought it was going to impact the restaurant industry long term. I thought there was going to be a big need, more than ever before, for fundraising businesses. And by the way, if you didn't figure this out already, these are all areas where there are franchises. Fundraising businesses were going to be needed more than ever before, because not-for-profits and schools and sports teams were not able to really raise much money during COVID with everybody at home. I thought that there was going to be an increased demand for cleaning businesses, and that air filtration was going to become more important and in more demand. we all talked about essential businesses during COVID, so I thought that was going to be a continuing discussion. If you go into business, there were going to be more people looking for something that they thought was really essential. Um, Retail businesses suffered a lot, if you remember, during COVID. And what happened was in the franchise world already during the worst part of COVID, before we had the vaccine, was that retail businesses had to figure out a new way to get in front of eyeballs. So as we talk about in the marketing world, how can you be seen when people aren't leaving their home? These are businesses that pay a lot of money to be in retail space that has a lot of foot traffic, has a lot of car traffic, but people weren't leaving their house. And so that's one of the big reasons that a lot of the retail businesses went away, is they didn't have that car and foot traffic. In the franchise world, what was happening within franchises is that the franchisees of the various companies were getting together online and saying, putting their heads together, what can we do? What can we do? Testing different strategies for reaching new customers, and then getting back together and sharing what the test found. Here's what's working, here's what's not working. And so I thought there was going to be more of an ongoing discussion and action plan in the marketing area, which is an area where in retail, especially outside of franchising, but also within, some of the franchises, they weren't doing a lot of marketing. They were just relying on that foot traffic and the car traffic. So I thought that was a trend that was going to continue. I thought there was going to be more of an interest in outdoor businesses, so that people didn't have to worry, hey, if I open up a business, what if something else happens? What if we can't go indoors again? And I thought there was going to be more of a focus on smaller spaces, where there could also be sort of an outdoor delivery component. Um, and I thought there was going to be more of a continuing discussion about what if this happens, what do we do, and a contingency plan in place, and less reliance on one or two customers. Because when you have a certain type of customer, whether you're a business that does a service, performs a service for consumers, general population, or sells a product to general population, or there's some franchises that sell products and services to other businesses. If a particular type of customer has a problem, your business is going to be in trouble if you're focused on just one or two types of customers. So I thought, well, after going through COVID, where that was the death knell for some businesses, that, in the future, more businesses were going to be cognizant of diversifying their client base. The reason that the stars are next to these two, most of this happened. It did happen in franchising, but the last two things, I feel like that's still a little bit of a shortfall for a lot of businesses, that they're very comfortable now, and they're forgetting about the contingency plans and trying to diversify their customer base. But we'll get there. We'll get there. So over the past, so that was 2021. So fast forward to today, what has happened as a result of going through COVID and these, things that started to happen as we went through COVID and came out of it? Well, one is the funding environment has changed. Interest rates are a lot higher than they were, partially or mostly because of inflation. As most of you probably know, the interest rate is supposed to help curb inflation, and it has curbed inflation. They are expected to come down, but in the meantime, it makes it more expensive for people who need to borrow money to open up a business to pay for that debt service. A big opportunity, actually, as some of the franchises became less hardy, less bulletproof, more vulnerable, more needy, M&As kicked up, and private equity started to invest more than ever in franchises, which has actually been a really, really positive thing in our industry, because these businesses have resources and money that they wouldn't have had for years had this not happened. And there's also a big sharing of information that happens when there's a bunch of franchises that come under the umbrella of an established franchisor. Um, Intelligence and actual resources, actual people in their home office, where you could have a really young franchise that if it were on its own, there might only be 3 or 4 people in the headquarters office, but because they're part of this umbrella organization, they have 20 people who are supporting them. Um, there are a lot more jobs than there were even before COVID, and the jobs are paying better in general, and they're more flexible. I mean, a lot of people did have to go back to the office, but for the most part, if they had to go back, it's still a hybrid situation. So it that has impacted people, the way that franchises grow. I'll talk about that in a minute. Um, it also means that labor costs are higher, and that was a big problem right after COVID, which has been addressed mostly. It's still a problem in some industries. I'll talk about that too. But it also means that when, when you have employees, if they have a lot of job options and there's some that pay better, it in some industries it's tough. Not all industries though. Then in some industries, especially restaurants, it is tougher to motivate and retain employees. Low, the entry level, minimum wage employees mostly. Now, from the employee standpoint, and I'm guessing that several of you, if not all of you on this webinar, have a job. Come out of COVID, there's all these things that we couldn't do for so long. We had the ability to most of all of us worked from home during COVID. And so we liked that flexibility. We liked having more time with our family. Most of us did. And we liked having that kind of flexibility where we could, not have to be seen in our chair 20, the entire time we were at work. So there's more emphasis on that. Employees want that. There's also new customers that have come out of this. Again, more pets, more kids, more unhealthy people, more of a need for fundraising dollars from not-for-profits in schools. Climate change became, there was a lot of talk of it during COVID, maybe a little bit less now, I'm sensing, but every summer we go through these massive rain and hailstorms, and, roofs blow off or get damaged, and somebody's talking about climate change, droughts, wildfires. So I would say that doesn't have, it hasn't impacted every industry, but it has impacted some of them, and some consumers are very focused on that. Um, Less people in office buildings, some industries, because of artificial intelligence and also changing needs. Not going to get too far into artificial intelligence, but we know it's already really started to impact entertainment, IT. There's a lot of customer service roles that are going away. There are jobs that are going away because companies don't need to have a person do this. Customers are okay working with a bot. Some of the marketing jobs, and then changing needs, because when we were all sitting at home in front of our computers all day, we had different needs than we do today. So that has been a big change. So in terms of the funding environment changing, the big difference has been that franchises are now sometimes accepting deposits when they know that somebody is applying for an SBA loan. But also because of the cost of taking out these loans now with the higher interest rates, people are looking at using home equity lines of credit, sort of a loan where it's secured by your home because the interest rate is lower on homes than it is for an SBA loan. And also a lot more people are looking at ROBS, which is a retirement fund rollover. It's not a loan, you use your own money. It ends up being sort of a tax shelter too. But it's a lot cheaper. If you have the money in retirement funds, people are looking at it and saying, well, maybe I could use some of that money to buy a business and make more money than I could if I just left this in stocks or a mutual fund, which is usually the case with retirement funds. As a result of M&As, as I was saying, there's this vertical scaling. Actually, what I was saying is there's a resource sharing. There's also vertical scaling, which is there are certain umbrella franchises where somebody, so that let's say it's a franchisor that focuses on home services. They might have 10 different franchises that their home office works with. Sometimes people, when they're ready to expand, they will buy licenses from another one of the company's home service franchises and cross market between companies. So you already have a customer list. Now you're able to offer them not just painting, but also deck repair, for example. The fact that there are more jobs, so the franchise industry, again, there was all this pivoting happening. So with more people being offered higher paying jobs and wanting flexibility, there are still plenty of people who really want a business and very toxic situations at work. But I would say there was more people just kind of putting up with it because they're, it's not painful enough for them to want to really do something about it. It will be painful if they're laid off or they're ready to retire and they realize they don't have anything close to enough money to do that. But in the short term, there's not a lot of pain. So a lot of franchises took a look at their business model and said, is there a way to make this model so that somebody could run a business, manage the business, either with a general manager in place or maybe just with a regular store manager, and keep their day job, especially if they're working from home and have that kind of flexibility. Okay, so that's been and really before COVID, that wasn't happening at all in the home services sector. It was only happening. There were some semi-passive businesses or businesses that could become semi-passive in retail. Now there are several of them in home services. And that's because the franchisor has put different elements, things like a call center, into place so that people could work the day job without being fired because they're actually working on their business and also grow a business at the same time. The cost of goods going up, that's tempered a little bit, but there's still a lot of things that are expensive. Labor is still more expensive. You're seeing it. I mean, part of the inflation is because the businesses eventually just passed those increased costs on to their customers. And so everything's more expensive. It doesn't mean that you can't have a profitable business. You're just going to charge more. And the franchises honestly have been doing this for years anyway, is they look at their costs and they put their heads together and they say, let's test to see if our customers can withstand a cost increase. They test it. They're still coming. Let's increase costs. It's a lot easier to do that when you're a franchise than when you're just an individual business owner, because you're afraid your customers are going to go away. But you can do it a lot easier when you're part of a franchise system. Now let's talk about less people going into an office. Remember vending machines? Okay, I used to get calls about vending machines all the time because there are vending machine franchises. Where would you put a vending machine if people aren't going into into an office? You could try to get them into schools, but that's very hard to do. It's not a great place to be right now. I would say the industry is really trying to figure it out, the vending machine industry. But also as a result of less people going into an office, we see in franchising businesses subleasing space from community centers, schools, other businesses, doctors' offices, and they bought a building or they leased a building. They don't need all of that square footage. They put a franchise in that same building, still owned by the doctor maybe, and it's an ancillary service. Maybe it's a weight loss clinic or a fitness business or something like that. But you see a lot more of that now, is how do we use existing space so that we're reducing our costs of starting a business, and we get people into a space where the customer is already showing up. So there's a lot more of this, thinking outside of the box happening. So now to address the need for people who want to go into business to they want to spend more time with their family. They liked the time flexibility that they may have right now, but maybe their employer is really hinting very uh um much very frequently. I don't know, there's a word that I can't think of, but you're getting the hints from your boss that, hey, we really, really would like people to come back into the office, especially in the DC area, where a lot of the people who work here are government contractors. You know, they like people to be in front of the client. Your boss wants that. And so, in order to help people, would-be business owners, have that again and maybe eventually transition out of their day jobs if they need to start a business with a day job initially, is we're seeing more and more franchises set up call centers so that a franchisee doesn't have to be the one answering the phone during the day. Also, in order to, again, help with that transition out of being an employee, there are a few franchises now that are offering group health insurance. Something like a salary. It's not a true salary, but there are a couple of franchises that have tested out something akin to a salary if you meet certain benchmarks, and other kinds of employee benefits. It's really hard, I think, to make that transition from employee to entrepreneur. And so, because you're getting a paycheck every couple of weeks, you're getting all these benefits. Um, but there are lots of reasons that people don't want to be an employee forever. So I think it's a positive thing that franchisors are starting to help with that transition. And then the home improvement franchises they're just more flexible than some of the retail franchises. So that helps a little bit with that too. In terms of the new customers, yes, there are a lot more services, educational services, after school services for children, tutoring services, and then for pets as well, all of that training, grooming, supplies. That's been a pretty big boom in franchising. In terms of personal care, health and fitness, and combined with the fact that there have recently been some proven drugs that can be combined with a exercise routine and a nutrition plan that would be hard, especially the nutrition plan might be hard to stick to without the drugs. With the drugs, makes you less hungry, and so you can do it. And people are seeing the success. They're seeing the celebrities slim down, and all of that. But on the brand companies that you see advertised on TV are very hard to get, for a variety of reasons. But there are actually some weight loss franchises that do other nutritional services too, but their bread and butter is weight loss, and they have a combined program, and they can mix the formulary, the generic formulary. They have doctors on staff doing this. You don't do this as an owner, unless you happen to be a doctor. But they have doctors that do this for the franchisees, to sell these very hard to get drugs that people will pay a lot of money for. And then there are fundraising franchises as well. So, and then in terms of the new problems, the new issues, how, if you are an employer that is trying to get your employees back to the office, there's a whole host of services that many of which are provided by franchises, air quality improvement, improved janitorial, business coaching, businesses that provide entertainment for employees, so they want to come back to the office. The social that is often set up by another business, because the employees are, the ones that are in the office don't have time to do everything. And look, there are consulting businesses too that help companies come up with incentives and perks. In terms of the deteriorating climate situation, There are more eco-friendly franchises, these, better products that are offered. They tend to be a little bit more expensive. So usually in franchising, you see if you want these more organic products, it's offered now, but you can also pay less money for the other product that we've been using for years. But there's also, I think, a lot more awareness, maybe not as much as of chemicals, but of landfills and recycling. We really talked about that a lot during the pandemic. A lot of us had, glass bottles, wine bottles sometimes, building up in our garages, and, where are these going? And, part of it was hard to get certain products. And so we were reusing things a lot more. So there are some more eco-friendly companies, including franchises. There is, like I said, roof damage, home and building foundation damage, tree damage, because of the changing climate. And there are franchises that fix that. And for people who want, real balance, the remote kind of businesses, almost, a lot of the B2B franchises do offer something like that. They were always there, but there's, I think, probably, I would say, a stronger interest or renewed interest in them for people who want to go into business. Some of those you can actually start without employees, and you can add employees, you can scale up, but you don't have to if you don't want to have employees. It's a choice. But there's like I said, the franchises are offering models now where you can outsource a lot of things through call centers, contractors, etc. And then there is a more widespread acceptance on the part of the franchises of somebody who wants to start a business with a general manager, because maybe they have other businesses and they want to grow their portfolio, or maybe they have a day job and they can't focus on the business. You don't want to take your eye off the business, but more franchises now are allowing people, I don't want to call them investors, because again, you do have to pay attention to your business. It's not like buying stocks or bonds, but they're more receptive to people, especially if they have some business experience, coming in with a general manager and allowing them to start a franchise, which a few years ago they wouldn't have allowed with somebody who had other businesses or a day job. And in the restaurant food space, there's more mobile businesses, truck options, but but a lot of the franchises are really more aware of the need to be scaled down, just in case there is a shortage of something, and also to build, the franchises building these strong vendor relationships. In some cases, they've actually brought manufacturing of some of the things in-house, so that franchisees, you having this business, you're not going to run out of an essential product that you need. There are more self-service options still that came about as a result of the pandemic. And then in terms of sit-down restaurants, we're seeing more of them offer an experience, because really, if you're going to charge a heck of a lot of money for a restaurant, for people to go on dates and come to your restaurant, you're more likely to go out and spend that money if there's an experience in addition to the food. Now, in terms of workers, hourly employees, franchises are helping with recruiting a little bit more. There's definitely a lot more intel sharing as to how to find franchisees. There's also a lot more training happening on the part of franchises, people sending their employees to the headquarters to train, but also because of Zoom, a lot of this training can happen virtually. So the franchisors have stepped up, and they're helping franchisees, you with your business, train your employees. So that's been another positive development. And then there are also staffing franchises, actually, that also are there to help companies. So I'm getting into the two now, the trends, obstacles, and opportunities. And now that you know where we came from and what's changed, here are the top 10 trends. There has been a huge boom in the retail services sector, and primarily in fitness, gyms, beauty, and wellness, which part of that is weight loss services. But there's also the cryotherapy businesses and the vitamin drip. People still are not as healthy as they were before COVID, because of a variety of reasons, eating bad food, becoming more sedentary during COVID. We're not quite, most people are not back to our fighting self, our best self. And so it's a huge boom. And anything that can help with the traditional, eat less, exercise more, that helps somebody get quicker results is a really popular service right now. So there's more of those coming on board, but there's some established players that really have always really been in this space and really have kind of doubled down on, we are really experts on this, that are, I think, fantastic businesses to start. Um, like I said, home services, there was a big boom because, people were sitting at home, things were breaking. The climate change broke a lot of things too, the roofs and everything that I talked about before. But now there's the real estate market has really kicked up after COVID, and it continues to be on fire despite high interest rates. And so there's a ton of home services where they still advertise and people call, but the owners are also networking with the realtors. There's so many realtors. There's, that they'll network with the realtors, the most successful ones in their territory, and say, hey, we can come in and turn this house around and get it ready for sale in a week. Well, that is wonderful news to a realtor, because the realtor just wants to get that house sold as quickly as possible. They'll also, sometimes help with staging, but it's really, some of these houses have really become run down. Also, as people, there's a trend that people are living longer. A lot of times, the family moves away, somebody, older relative passes away. The family can't, what do we do with the house? What do we do with the things? There's a lot of services related to this, and a lot of them are available with the help of a franchise corporate office. The scaling, as I was saying, with these mergers and acquisitions happening, there's a lot more. We're seeing a lot more. Somebody has restaurants or restaurant franchises. We're seeing a lot more scaling by opening up other brands. And it used to be that you saw this almost exclusively in restaurants, where somebody might have a Baskin Robbins and they would open up a Little Caesars. Now what we're seeing is business owners or investor groups who own restaurants, and they're saying, wait a minute, restaurants are even more expensive to open now. What if we opened up one of these retail service businesses? We're not really, we've never run a service business before. It's always been about a product, but look at these profit margins, a lot more compelling than a lot of the restaurant businesses. And the franchise brings the expertise in that area. They don't have to have, even though they have restaurant expertise, going into a retail service business, you don't have to have retail services. You don't have to have beauty experience, fitness business. The franchisor brings that. What the company has that's run the restaurants is they know how to hire. They already have some staff in place who can go and train with the franchise to learn this other thing. And again, they end up with a business in a new sector that tends to have a much better profit margin. As I was saying before, business franchise, especially cost reduction franchises, there's sort of a renaissance as companies continue to look for ways to be more profitable. A lot of that has to do with cost reduction, especially because costs have gone up. And then, as I said before, more call centers. And I think I sort of touched on this before, having experienced franchisors go into new similar franchises that are not the same kind of business that they've already run. More franchises that can be manager run, more acceptance of or comfort, I guess, on the part of the franchisor that, yes, you have other businesses, you're pulled in many directions, you have a day job, we'll let you open this business. as long as you've identified a manager or a general manager, depending on the business. So that's a huge trend, big difference before COVID and after COVID. Using the retirement funds or to roll it over into a new retirement fund and taking some of that money out. But it's not technically taking it out. It's a whole complicated thing that it's above my pay grade, but suffice to say that there's more of that than ever because people don't want to pay the type of for the for the loans if they don't have to. The interest rates are just making it more expensive to borrow the money. More franchises being receptive to a bridge loan. Also, in the funding world, banks there's been especially since after COVID, but I think even before COVID, for some of the smaller loans, the lending criteria has gotten a little bit less stringent. They're not looking for as much equity for the smaller loans. When I say equity with these loans, you don't have to collateralize anything, but the banks before COVID were really looking for you to have as much equity or more equity than you were borrowing. Now, supposedly, they don't need it for the smaller loans, not as much of it. So that's a positive thing for people who want to open up businesses. And during COVID, a lot of all of the franchise, I will say, franchises, by the way, continued to grow during COVID. People don't realize that. It wasn't certainly anyone's best year, but a lot of people especially people who had been in businesses before, they said, well, this is awful, but we've seen disruptions before. We know that we're gonna come out of this. We're gonna double down and get into, I mean, with real estate being vacated by businesses that were going out of business, it made a lot of the real estate significantly cheaper than it was before COVID. So a lot of businesses significantly grew during COVID. And not just, I mean, there were still a lot of people who thought, I really don't want to work for somebody else forever. I'm not being treated very well. I'm not getting great opportunities. And by the way, things are getting a lot more expensive. I'm not sure if I can even live on my salary anymore. So during COVID, all the franchises offered a meet the team day, it's something that happens at the end of the research process. People will go through especially if they get some guidance from somebody who knows what they're doing. They get to the end of this process after doing a ton of the research, and then they're invited to headquarters to meet the team, to meet the people who are going to be hand-holding you in and training you to run this business the way that the other successful franchisees have done. So during COVID, of course, that happened through Zoom mostly, or some other virtual telecom platform or video conference platform. Today, a lot of the franchises still offer it, but they'll offer both. They'll offer, come to our headquarters or do it this way. I mean, ideally, I think it's still best to meet people in person because these are going to be your colleagues. I mean, the corporate office isn't going to be your colleagues. They're there to help you. They're kind of working for you. But I mean, if you're interviewing people, I still feel like an in-person interview if you're interviewing employees, you would still prefer to do an in-person interview, at least at the end. So if you can go personally, go. But if you can't, or let's say you're married and you really want your spouse to be part of this decision, which you really should if you're in a committed relationship and you want to be happy for the rest of your life going into a business and not have an unhappy partner that you're living with. So sometimes people can't, their schedules aren't meeting up, especially if you have a day job, your spouse has a day job, your partner. It's nice to have this option because then, you don't have to find a time when both of you can travel, and maybe you have kids, and so it's really hard to take the time away. So it's a good trend overall. But if you have the opportunity to go in person and meet the people who are going to be working for you, that's always the best way. So, obstacles. Okay, so let me talk to you about what kinds of things tend to go wrong, because sometimes people go into a perfectly good franchise where most people are successful and they still don't make it. I mean, there are franchises where most people aren't successful, and obviously you want to avoid that. You know, you want to, but I'm going to tell you how to avoid that and how to avoid, you know, picking a business that could be working for some people but maybe wouldn't work for you. And I talk about, you know, take you back to when you were maybe in elementary school, and the teacher would ask you, you know, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I know, and I think I have a art project that I had to do about this. I wrote that I wanted to be a doctor and I wanted to be a movie star. So the thing is, yes, those are definitely careers, and obviously, I had heard that these two careers make a lot of money. But the fact is that most of us are not going to make money at either. It's you know, really, not everybody makes a good doctor. Not everybody can afford medical school, but also not everybody. I know personally, I would not be a good doctor. I was a pretty good lawyer, but a doctor was not going to be. That's not my skill set. And I definitely did not have the talent to be a singer or a movie star. So, you know, there are businesses that also can be profitable, but you really have to understand who is profitable in them. So, one mistake people make is they let emotions, or I hear people say, well, I love this. This pizza is so good. Or I think this children's service is fantastic. My child went to a center and loved it, and we don't have one of these in our area, and we really need one. That is actually not a good way to approach it, because the skills that you need to do that, the time that you need to build up that business, and the money that you need to build up that business and have enough customers may not be what you come to the table with. Again, we're not all going to be able to be successful as doctors or movie stars. um, when people are successful in franchises, actually the approach is, what is my goal? And I'm going to talk about this too, but they look at their goals first, and then they try to find a business that matches up with, gives them what they need to have in terms of money, in terms of lifestyle, in terms of the time that they have to put into the business, and then they find a business that they feel good about. Doesn't have to be a passion. Passion comes when you love your life, when you love the money that you're making, when you love your lifestyle, when you know that you're bringing something wonderful to your community or to other businesses. That the passion should come later. The matching up the goals should come first, but people usually do it the opposite way. Also, a lot of times people will only, when they're searching for a business, they will only focus on businesses where they know they already have industry experience. But the fact is that most franchises don't even want people with industry experience, and less than 25% of franchisees are in the same industry that they were employed in. And why might that be? Well, um, the franchisor is going to have the industry experience. And the problem with you having the industry experience too is, how likely are you to take the training, take the coaching, and do it their way if you think you already know how to do it? Franchisors have found that you are less likely to do it. There is an exception. Most of the experienced food franchises do want people who have managed restaurants before, not just servers, but people who have managed restaurants. I think it's because there is a huge misunderstanding as to what one would have to do as the owner of a restaurant. There's a lot more moving parts and things that can go wrong than people know, unless they've already managed restaurants. And by the way, if you've never seen the TV show The Bear, which I think is on FX, that will give you a sense of what a lot of restaurant owners go through. It's not pretty, but, and you know, there are people who their family was in the business, they always worked in the business, and they stay in it because they feel like that's what they know. But as I said, a lot of the restaurateurs now are getting out, they're expanding into other industries that don't have as many moving parts. So as you're doing a search, don't limit it to just the industries where you've worked. you look for transferable skill sets instead, and let the franchisor take care of knowing the customer, knowing how to price it, etc. Okay. Now, going into business with a partner, as I said earlier, one of my businesses I am in with a partner. But it happens to be the business that I'm not relying on for income. It's more of that is more of my passion project. It's fun, but I spend more time at consulting because that is the source of my income. When you go into business with a partner, you have to work out how are the profits going to be split. I mean, most people who have this idea of going into business with a partner, the natural attraction, the first thing is there's somebody else who is putting money in so we can afford more. And then the second attraction is somebody can help me with the work. But when the business makes money, your partner is going to expect to receive a fair share of that money. So it's going to take you maybe longer to make the money that you need to live if you're relying on this business to support you. And partners don't always agree on how to do things. And lots of partnerships end in a fight. They have to, they end up in court. If they don't end up court, they have to sell the business and divide assets. It's kind of like a marriage without love. It happens all the time. And we probably all know people who it's happened to. I've had it happen to a couple of my family members, and it's not pretty. So try not to go into business in the first instance with a partner. If you have a business and you buy, let's say, multiple licenses of a franchise, and now you're ready to expand, open up the next location, you could have other people invest but not as a partner, but you could form a separate corporation and have them invest money into it, but you would still want to retain the rights to make all the decisions if you possibly can. When you go into business with a franchise, as I said, there's a contract. You can hire a franchise lawyer. A lot of times people will hire a business lawyer to look at their franchise contract. Don't do it. Business lawyers, I used to be one, they don't know what to look for. They don't know what's typical in any, in every franchise contract. You do want to hire somebody who's seen multiple franchise agreements, knows what's not going to get changed. Very little will change, by the way. If anything, most franchisors do not like to change the contract. They won't. I've been doing this for 15 years. I don't think I've ever seen a franchise change the contract for somebody. Sometimes they'll give you a side letter with some clarification or some more time to do something, but they're not going to change the franchise fee. They're not going to change the royalty. They're not going to change mostly anything. So if you do hire a franchise lawyer, you hire them so that you understand what to expect, but don't go in with the expectation of having them change the contract. And if you are going into a business where you do have other businesses or a day job, I told you there's more of those businesses that you can open now in the franchise sector, but still the majority of them expect you to not have a full-time commitment, to be full-time in the franchise. So I've seen franchises say, yeah, you can do this while you have a day job or other businesses. You have to make sure that there are actually franchisees currently in that situation that you're in that are successful. And if it doesn't exist yet, then it's a risk. It's a big risk. It might not work out for you, even if the franchise allows it. Now, let's talk about opportunities. So I think that there's still a huge opportunity in the wellness sector and the beauty sector. You're seeing a lot of growth. A lot of these are opening now in the summer. But remember, with retail businesses, when somebody is opening them now, they may have signed a franchise agreement 8 months ago, 10 months ago. a lot of people caught on a while ago to the fact that people are having health problems now, again, because diet and exercise and not doing the right things, eating all the takeout food during COVID, not being able to get groceries and all that kind of stuff. So there's still huge opportunity there. And I think that that will continue. I don't see that changing. Cost savings will never go out of business. And again, these businesses like cost savings where they can reduce cost, they can actually reduce costs for businesses. I think we're going to continue to see as companies continue to shift based on AI, based on cost of things, still being high. You're going to see more and more businesses feeling the crunch and needing to reduce costs. So these companies actually go in and for no cost, they will renegotiate. How can they do that? Because they share the cost savings with the client. So it's really a no risk proposition for a potential client, a company that is hoping to reduce its costs. It could only go well, and they don't have to pay for it if it doesn't go well. But also businesses that replace expensive and breaking, by the way, HVAC systems, insulation businesses. These are businesses that for, franchises that for businesses that have these large spaces, that could be a huge cost savings for them, just reducing the amount of energy, putting more green products that don't cost as much to run, can significantly also reduce a cost for a business. I think we're going to see more conversations about climate change, cleaning supplies that don't harm the environment, reusing things. Again, people are very much aware of climate change just because it impacts us all the time with wind, with hail, etc. So your customers are aware of it, and they, increasingly want to do they want to use products and do things that cause no harm. Companies that have employees need more hiring and retention support than ever. So when I started talking 15 years ago, when I was first in this business about staffing companies, staffing franchises, I would say that companies always need staffing services because the need for employees is cyclical already, because we have certain seasons of the year where companies have to staff up and staff down. But also after any kind of a recession, there is a reluctance of companies to hire full-time employees, but they still need help. So they rely on staffing businesses a lot because what they don't want, as much as they can control it, is they don't want to hire employees and let them go. If you've ever been an employer, you know that is a very painful process. There are also potential, lawsuits that employees over the age of, I think, 40 can file against you if it looks like you've disproportionately, fired the older staff. So the staffing company, using a staffing company's employment through staffing companies is continues to grow. And I think there's more need for it than ever before, because not only have those trends continued, and not only are we very much aware of recession talk and cyclical talk, but we have remote workers. Remote workers brings another level of complexity to having employees. Also, there still is an ongoing discussion of 4-day work weeks. And how do I do that? My employees are asking me about 4-day work weeks. We want to retain the best talent. So maybe I'm going to have to do that, but I don't really know how to do that and still get as much productivity out of them. So I think that's going to continue to be a big trend and go up. One of the major franchises has waived its franchise fee for about a year. And I'm talking to a lot of people who are suited, they're looking for that kind of business about that, because it's like a $50,000 cost savings for them. We're going to see more investor groups that hire a general manager. The stock market is really good right now. We don't know what's going to happen. Nobody ever knows what's going to happen in the future of the stock market. Investor groups are taking money out of investments and taking money out of equity, out of property that has had values go up, and they're putting it into businesses with a general manager in place. I just, again, I feel like I'm seeing it happen, but I feel like it's because there's so much uncertainty ahead. So let's take the money out some of the money out that we have now, put it into something. A good business is always going to produce more money than the stock market. So we're also, hoping to increase make our fortunes now by diversifying our portfolios. And the franchises. So as much as there's been a discussion about AI putting people out of jobs, this fear of AI, franchises are pretty much across the board embracing it. They're harnessing it. They're using it for customer service, chatbots. They're using it to capture new customers, and they can do this because they're better funded than an individual person going into business. So and part of that is because of private equity investment. Part of it is they're using some of the royalty money. They're investing like I've never seen before into technology, and the franchisees get to use it. So these are all wonderful, and something to kind of keep in mind as you're looking for business opportunity. I wanted to say, if you go into business, if you're going to do this, you should look at this as a 5-year project at minimum. Some people do start their business and start thinking about, okay, I'm going to build it and try to sell it in 5 years. The first 2 years are going to be the roughest because that's going to be where there's the most learning curve. But usually in a good franchise, after 2 years, things tend to be more consistent. But you're building a foundation, you're building a client base in the first couple of years. Remember that as you're thinking about selling your business, it can take up to 2 years to find a buyer that is actually going to go through with it. Your franchise, by the way, franchises can be bought and sold just like other businesses. The franchisor is involved in that, and you should understand the transfer process, but they typically don't veto anything unless it's an extreme situation. They really want franchisees to be able to say, I made this much money. I sold for this much money. It was wonderful. And that's the story that people who are validating a franchise now are hearing from somebody who used to be in the franchise. Because don't know if you know this, but that document that the franchise files with the government, it will list people who left the franchise, including people who sold for a profit within the past year. So as you're investigating a business, you might call somebody who sold, and wouldn't it be great in my franchise if I had people who said, yeah, I had this business, we ran it for 5 years, 10 years, whatever, and I sold it for $1 million. The franchisor wants that to be the story. So they don't tend to get in the way. Sometimes they can actually help you find a buyer because they want there to be some franchise actually have a resale program in place. So you can go to a business broker when you're selling your franchise. A lot of people do, but sometimes the franchisor finds the buyer for you and you don't have to pay the business brokerage fee. So, I mean, ultimately, you still want to make sure that a franchise vehicle is the right thing for you. And I'm not going to go through all of this. We're running short of time and I want to take questions, but the big thing is, under disadvantages, you have to be somewhat of a system follower. There are some systems that are more like a lot of rules and some that are pretty flexible, but there's always going to be some rules because they have to maintain brand consistency. And some people are disruptors and inventors, and we love them too, but they're not right for a franchise. So that's the big thing. It's also a commitment. It's for people who are more committed to making something happen. I was speaking with someone yesterday and they said, some people are just more bold about going after their goals. That's who a franchise is for. It's not a hobby. It's you're making a commitment. They're going to put a lot of time and energy into making you successful if you can commit to this. And again, don't lead with, here's what I am passionate about. Don't lead with emotion. Look at what the business owners that you can talk to. The franchise disclosure document also has a full list of every single franchisee that they have. You can contact them and interview them. So talk to them about what they had to do to be successful. That's the first place to look. And you want to talk to some people who are doing very well, but also balance that out with people who are more average and a few that are struggling too, and figure out who are you the most like, whose skill set, whose time commitment is more similar to what you would bring to the table. Um, so you want to think through, lifestyle, where do you want to be working, the transferable business skills. Like I said, this is really the crux of it, is the business skills, not the industry experience. But also you have choices. You don't have to pick a business with employees, but some people love that and they want to become a set, even if they have to start full time now. There's a lot of people who go into business and they step back in a few years, but they have the management experience and they like managing people. That's why it's important to discuss these things first. Where do you want to start and where do you want to end? The budget that you have to put into it, the business environment you want to work in, the amount of time you have to put in. How many locations do you really want to manage? I mean, there's some businesses where you'll only ever have one location. Your location might grow into bigger space, but not everybody's good at managing multiple locations, each of which has employees. So, like I said, we have these discussions up front. And you also have a choice of customers. When your customer is somebody who works for a business versus a person who owns a house or has children or pets, it's a very different customer. And we talk through that as well. Sometimes people's strengths are more for somebody who has a little more emotion into it versus a business customer where you're just checking the box for somebody. So initially find a business that you can get into with your money, your time, and your skill set where you will not fail. And the more research you do, it'll improve your odds of success. This research process, um, most of my clients take about 3 months to go through all of the research that I coach them through. And that's with my coaching. Most people don't know really how to research franchises, but you put a lot of time into this if you really want to cover all bases and not miss something that could be problematic for you. Um, Long term, you want to find a business that will allow you to have the lifestyle you want, the money that you want, whatever you said you don't have now and you would like to have. The strategy is to find a business that will do that for you, or at least start doing that for you. Because again, you might have more than one business eventually. And then, you want to build the business from day one, thinking about exiting one day. So one day, for one reason or another, you're not going to be in the business. So you want to create an asset that you can sell. Some businesses don't sell for a lot of value, and that could be okay if you're more about creating income streams today and through retirement. But for some people, the exit strategy is to have an asset that you sell that ends up being a legacy for your children, your grandchildren. Some people want a business that can become a retirement job where they can put in 10 hours a month in retirement and keep the mind sharp. It feels good to have money coming in during retirement, but you're not working that hard. You don't have to leave the house every day. And maybe you can, I don't know, work from your beach house or your cruise ship. That satellite technology has gotten really, really good. There are people who are working from cruise ships now. Yes, it's happening. But think about how you might want to exit the business one day. There are a lot of different choices. Not every business that you find is going to be available in your market. I think one of the big things that I have found is that there are a lot of blind spots. In franchising, when people think of a franchise, they think fast food or some kind of retail. There's actually over 120 different industries. You probably heard about some things today that you might not have ever thought of as being a possible franchise. There's a lot out there that are blind spots to people who are trying to make this very important decision. Um, Again, they're not all going to be available in your market. Some of it's going to be already sold out. If you're in one of the registration states, some of the states don't allow all the franchise. I mean, there's no franchise well, I don't want to say there's no franchise that's not licensed in every state. There are some, but some franchises you can't open in certain states. Okay. Also, certain kinds of businesses, home care businesses, where you're performing some sort of a medical service or quasi medical service, some of the home services businesses, they require a certain kind of license that's harder to get in some states. So, in Virginia, because I'm doing this program for the Virginia Small Business Development Summit, I'm going to assume that most of you live in Virginia. You should, get advice from somebody who knows your state. That would be a good thing for you to do and knows what is harder, versus not hard to get in your state, what's available in Virginia, what businesses can open here, what cannot, et cetera, et cetera. Not every franchise you hear of has much of a track record or any track record. Not all franchises are profitable. And profit is $1 over cost. So you need to understand, think through how much money you need to make, how much would be worth it. If you're going to put your time and your money into a business, what kind of return would make it worth it for you? And if you're trying to leave your job, or maybe you're trying to shut down a poorly performing business and get into a more profitable business, you should, define that and qualify what is the kind of money that I would need to make this a win for me. Because not even a profitable business might not be profitable enough for you. In terms of cost, here's just a real quick idea. Home-based business, there are businesses you can open up for under $50,000. I will tell all in. This is your franchise fee, your startup costs, the working capital that you need for the first couple of months to kind of get your business off the ground, where your business, might start being able to cover some of those costs. When I first started doing this, there was almost nothing under $50,000. Basically, they're home-based businesses. These tend to be businesses where people really aren't making money. They're making very, very little money, and you could figure this out by talking to them, because you have, the list of the franchisees in the disclosure document. The businesses where people are, typically living off of the money, in the home services sector, they tend to be somewhere between $50,000 to $100,000. Some of these businesses are using part-time office space, the executive suite kind of space. The costs go up basically as you start to need to hire employees and as you start to need permanent space. And so, anything in retail right now is, I used to say you could open up some retail businesses near Richmond, near Washington, D.C. for $175,000 all in. I don't think that exists anymore. It's really, you need a minimum of $250,000 in a high rent area like we are in. Maybe in some of the more rural parts of Virginia, you need a little bit less, but then you don't have the population density, so you can't charge as much. So, if you have a choice, I say go for the more densely populated areas. If you have a B2B franchise, go where the businesses are. If you have a business that caters to the general population, go to the parts of the area, your state, where people with more money live. That's what you really ultimately want, better than trying to save money opening up. So, retail over $250,000, restaurants these days over $350,000 to open up a restaurant. And I'm not talking about a big restaurant space. I'm talking about a small Subway. So you just have to understand that, yes, you might have always wanted to open up a restaurant, but what if you could get two territories, two locations of a business for the same cost as one restaurant, and your profit margins could be thicker? You might want to look a little bit deeper than maybe just the restaurant space. Okay. Sources of capital, as I talked about, the ROBS is a strategy people are using. Home equity lines of credit. With the 7A program, it's becoming a little bit easier to get those if you're borrowing less money. But it's going to be more expensive money to get. We talked about this already. If you want some help, again, we don't charge anything. I don't charge anything for the service, because the franchisors basically pay my way. We go through an assessment process, and we spend a lot of time talking up front about what are you trying to achieve. And, I give people recommendations, and we go back and forth until we figure out if there's something that makes sense, because sometimes there isn't. Sometimes you have to wait until you have more time or more capital. And that is about it. Here's some resources that you might want to go to in addition to my book, which, by the way, I do not get a royalty for saying it. I do think there's some good advice in there, though. And E-Myth Revisited and Street Smart Franchising, people say that when they got into the franchise search process, these two books had been really helpful. Here's my contact information too. I'll take questions in a minute. If here's how you can get in touch, but if you scan this QR code, it will get you you will get my newsletter. It goes out a couple times a month with business advice, more free webinars, articles and things like that. And if you also think you might want to start by taking the assessment, take the entrepreneur profile assessment. You can request it through this link as well. And that is all I have. Sheila, hi. Are there any questions that came in during my talk?
Um,
I'm not used to talking for an hour and a half anymore.
that was a lot of good information. The only let's see, a question came on earlier. What was M&A? Mergers and acquisitions. Did I answer
Right.
that one correctly?
Yeah, there's been a lot of investment in franchising, including investments by existing franchisors.
Okay.
So that's the M&A, buying up younger companies, bringing the resources of these larger successful franchisors to the younger companies. It enables the younger companies, generally speaking, to grow faster, and the franchisees have a lot more support than they would have had if it was just the franchise by itself trying to grow.
Okay. And then on another question just came in, what does MR stand for in the last slides?
Oh,
Man,
manager run business.
great, thank you.
Most franchises out there, I didn't talk about that, but in the early days of franchises, a lot of these companies we call them chuck in a truck businesses, where you would get, the shirt, the truck, the franchise would be helping with certain things, but it would be, most of the owners were doing the marketing, the customer service, and the service or product delivery themselves. A lot of franchises still start this way, but I don't sort of focus on any particular industry, but my sweet spot is really executive type businesses where the service of the product almost doesn't matter because you're hiring people to do that technical work. You're the CEO of a business that is delivering a necessary, practical service that your community needs. And the managers can often come in too and take takes more off of the plate of you, the CEO of the franchise.
Great. Do we have any other questions? Well, we can pick Heather's brain for 3 more minutes. Nothing is dropping in. Just so everyone knows, all of the information that Heather has up here, all these links, we can you'll have them in the recording, but we can also share them in the follow-up email. So you have an easy way to contact her. So, well, I don't see any other questions falling in. So Heather, if you want to just end this on something quickly and then I'll wrap us up. Oh, wait, I spoke too soon. So how can I get more information about Virginia business opportunity?
Get in touch with me, scan this QR code, or reach out with the email. I also have a calendar link, by the way, if you want to chat through some resources and ideas, you can get on my calendar through this link, and I would be happy to share my resources with you.
Fabulous.
Yeah, there's a lot of people. I guess my final thought is, as they say, business ownership isn't for everyone. Franchise ownership is not for everyone the best way to get into business. You do have to be coachable. But it's a nice way to go into business because, you are part of a team, you have colleagues again. A lot of the franchises have exclusive territories, so your colleagues will freely share their best practices with you and actually help you out because people in business know that givers get. If you share, you tend to also get help when you need it. So it's a nice way to get into business. Um, Nobody knows today whether there's going to be the perfect business for you right now, but don't be afraid to start looking. Nobody's going to try to talk you into anything, but there's some really good opportunities out there right now. If you've got a goal, we'll try to see if we can help you reach it. Us, the Virginia Small Business Development Centers, we're all here to help, and we're all free services.
Wonderful. Heather, thank you so much. This has been so informative. I want to thank everyone who did join us today, and remind you that you're going to receive an email with this recording and those links so that you can get into contact with Heather. We appreciate you filling out the poll that helps Heather, and it helps the SBDC for future webinars. If you would like to sign up for upcoming webinars or access recorded webinars, please visit virginiasbdc.org/training. These resources are designed to be used in collaboration with your local SBDC advisors. You can sign up for a free and confidential session at help@virginiasbdc.org or via our website. And we do hope to see you all at our next session. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Everyone.